can, um, just in case. But you don't have to look at it, obviously.
Recorded.
Yeah, okay, so it's recording. So also, did I hear from everyone about your experience so far? Okay, if you, everyone make sure when you come into a class that you mute your microphone. If you don't know how to do that, maybe you can ask someone near you. And also try to keep your screen on so I can see, you. Okay, good. Amina, it looks like you still have your microphone on. There you go, perfect. Yeah, it gives a little bit of feedback and static when the microphones are on. Also, if you know how to open the chat window, it's in the upper right-hand corner. Go ahead and do that now. And I'd like to see everyone maybe type in hello or hi, so I can see that you know how to use the chat. Good. I see Nadine has done it, Esther. Good. I'm also going to share my screen right now. Oh, I got to hide the chat real quick in order to do that. Okay, I'm going to share. Good. So now everyone should be able to see my screen. Well, in 1 second, you will be able to. Okay, it looks like my screen is shared. I'm going to go ahead and look at the actual class in the lesson for today, which was what is newsworthy. This is a 20-point assignment, just so you're aware. So we will be using the general grading rubric with this, which is also posted in the class resources on PLUS Portal, if you want to go look at that. If you turn in this assignment and you grade a grade that you are not happy with, you can go back, look at my comments of what I've written about your work, correct or modify it, and then resubmit it. You could resubmit as many times as you like. I will just say, though, if you resubmit your work and I am busy with the normal coursework, I may not get to the resubmitted stuff. So the priority goes to the weekly lesson, and if I have time, I will regrade anything that's been submitted for a second or third time. And that can improve your score, obviously. So this week is about, what is newsworthy, and there's a worksheet that I gave you that kind of talks about 5 aspects of what is newsworthy. And if I open that first and take a look at it, there was 5 components to it. The first is timeliness, and this really distinguishes what's history from what is news, because sometimes, but this is a gray area, just like with all the other 5. Sometimes history can be current news. For example, even today with the COVID virus, that's definitely a news story today, and it's timely because it's happening to us now. But there are other news stories that may come up that mention SARS, for example, or MERS, which are some previous pandemics that have affected people that may actually have something to do with the current situation. So timeliness, the closer it is to it happening right now, probably makes it a newsworthy story. The second one is proximity. Proximity has to do with how close is it to you, right? And they're saying your community or your region or even your school, for example. And going to the COVID example again, proximity to this, yeah, well, it affected our school. So yes, it is newsworthy probably. But also you could say it affected the country that we're living in, right? So proximity is kind of like an onion where you can peel the layers. The closer you get to the center, the closer it is to you. And that's a good way to think of it. The third one is conflict and controversy. Usually a story that has no conflict in it or any type of controversy really isn't a newsworthy example. However, I will say that things that appear to be not newsworthy because it has no conflict in it or controversy, may actually still be newsworthy. A great example is a news story I was looking at this morning about Yosemite Park, which is a national forest in the United States. And in there, because the park is closed, the bears and the wolves and all the other animals are running around the park like it's a big party, right? Because there's no people there. And so they're having a good time. It's kind of like a feel-good story. And so we might be able to say, well, that's not a newsworthy story because there's no conflict or controversy in that. However, I would argue that even these stories that seem like they don't have controversy actually do. And in the case of the Yosemite Park, people may go, well, wait a minute. So if the animals are having such a great time now, shouldn't we keep the parks closed all the time? Because it's healthier for the animals. And so that would bring up controversy because the people who want to go to the park and see the animals, or they want to go camping or hiking, that's going to create conflict between the perhaps environmentalists and the people who want to go out and enjoy the park, right? Now, the fourth one is human interest, and they're saying, what are they saying here? People are interested in other people. So this is, this really, I think, has a lot to do with entertainment, for example, like news stories about musicians or actresses or actors, stories that, you have an interest in it. And there might be other categories, but that is like a story that would be newsworthy to you. Sports, for example, or the example I used in the assignment where we had to put what's newsworthy, I put skateboarding. And a lot of you would go, well, skateboarding I'm not interested in that. That's not news. But because I have an interest in it, it is newsworthy to me. And that brings up another point. Some of these stories may be newsworthy to some people, but not others. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Relevance is the last one. And they're saying, stories that help make good decisions. They're talking about cooking, finding recipes. This is another example that I put, which was the stock market. A lot of you would go, well, the stock market, whether companies are doing well or not I'm not interested in that whatsoever. But to me, it has relevance because it affects my livelihood, it affects my retirement. And so the stock market is relevant to me, so it makes it newsworthy. Now, those are the 5 different categories. I'm going to let you guys, if you want to chime in, you can unmute your microphone and ask a question, or if you want to add something to what I said, go ahead. This is your moment.
Could you please explain the instructions for the newsworthy assignment again?
Yeah, I'll go over the full assignment in a moment, but first let's see if anyone has any questions about any of these 5 attributes and if they need any clarification, or if you want to add something to it, or if you have an example.
I don't get why. Well, I get why a news story would be complete with conflict and controversy, but couldn't there just be an interesting news story just for fun, like even if there isn't any conflict and controversy?
Yeah, that is true. And I guess kind of what you're saying is, can there be a story that has, what you're talking about is more human interest or relevance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or what if it has 4: timeliness, proximity, human interest, and relevance, conflict and controversy? Well, once again, what is newsworthy is subjective. These 5 attributes, or these values, they're calling them, are something, we actually, I think it starts off where at the very top, or no, it was at the bottom. There it is, yeah. They're talking about a center, above the fold, or a centerpiece story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And going back to these 5, well, let's say it has 4. Maybe that story isn't as newsworthy as something that has all 5. So yes, I think you could have a story that has 2 or 3 or 4, or maybe even just 1, and it's still newsworthy to you or to some people, but it's not going to be one of those stories that's above the fold or a centerpiece story.
Oh, yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, yeah, you can have one that has only a couple attributes.
Okay. But so like they just use all 5 so that it would interest people in general, like the average person.
Yeah, well, when you think about the new, like when you hear the word news, this is how I look at it. And something that is like in the news that everyone is talking about, that would be one of those stories that's a centerpiece story or above the fold. And that's like something that definitely, probably more than likely has all 5 of these attributes. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
When you
Yeah.
start taking these away one by one, less and less people are going to be interested in it.
Yeah.
It's less and less likely that someone is going to hear about it because, people are talking about it.
People. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the word newsworthy, right? Newsworthy, this word here, that's actually kind of what they're trying to get at. It doesn't mean it's not news if it doesn't have all 5. It just means something is super newsworthy if it has all 5 of them. But that's a very good question. Very good. Any other questions before we move on to another piece of this? Okay, I gave you guys a minute. Let me check the chat really quick and make sure there's nothing in here. Oops. See if anyone said anything while I was talking. Nope. Once again, you can post a question in the chat. Okay. And you guys can ask each other questions as well, but try to keep the chat about what's going on in class. Okay, so that was the newsworthy worksheet. Now let me go to see what you guys think are stories that are newsworthy, or maybe even areas or categories. Because I use the example of, whoops, let me go up just a little bit, of the stock market and skateboarding as being newsworthy. I see you guys are joining in, that's good. So we have Esther says, I like news stories about funny things and entertainment. Great. That would be probably the categories of, where did I just put that worksheet? Entertainment, once again, and funny things. That might be human interest and relevance, right? It could also probably be proximity if something funny happened in your area or something very entertaining, right? Naomi said, news about detective cases, yes. Sad and terrifying. Animals and zoos, yeah, like the news story this morning that I read about Yosemite Park had to do about animals. There's lots of stories actually right now talking about zoos. Yeah, and detective cases, this is also very interesting because this kind of goes with what I was talking about with history as well. Many of these cases that are going on live, like where there might be a serial killer or some really dangerous person, they sometimes will refer back to older news stories or news events about other people who have done similar things. And that category of detective cases really, I think, relies on that. Okay, so that's going back to talking about that. Fifi was talking about news stories about inventions people have made, what's happening. In that, actually, when you look at the COVID situation right now, the invention that people are kind of talking about are 3D printers and how they're helping with people making masks for people and face shields. Also about the vaccines that they're working on. So that's kind of like inventions that has to do with news. So that's a great thing as well. Kate also mentions celebrities and entertainment. Australia talks about military inventions, interesting things to talk about. Radio waves, aircraft clearly disabled from miles out. Yeah, so that has a lot to do with, sometimes they have these things where they talk about flyby, where Russia Or these countries that are in contention will sail their ships or fly their airplanes close to other countries to kind of make them mad. And they talk about inventions that are kind of counteracting all that, and like drones. Something going back to the COVID thing once again, taking that not the invention, but the military thing that Astriel said. It's not necessarily military, but they're thinking about using drones to fly around the city to take people's temperatures and to make sure that people are standing far enough apart to it's almost like a police state or a military state. So that has to do with inventions as well. Going down to Nadine, said about people doing good deeds, celebrities, astrology, space. Yeah, tons of stuff. Once again, the good deeds. I just saw a story this morning about a person who paid 1,000 US dollars for a donut. And I was like, what? That's kind of crazy, because I like donuts, but I would never pay $1,000 for a donut. And I went and looked, and it was a person who did a good deed because he loved this donut shop. It was a very small donut shop. And he bought a donut for $1,000 to help the business stay open because they didn't have enough customers and they were going to have to close. So that's kind of like a good deed thing. And that does have to do, once again, some people will say, well, that's not news. But when we look at our 5 attributes, if that donut shop closed, it will affect other people because of proximity, right? It can cause conflict because it would be saying, well, maybe the government should have stepped in and gave that company help, gave them money to stay open so that people don't lose jobs. So it can have conflict in it, even though we think it doesn't, when it's a good deed type story. And that kind of goes back to what I think Naomi was saying, right? Angela says, I like stories about funny things. Once again, that could have, that even can have conflict in it as well. When you think about some comedians, for example, they're making jokes and it makes some people upset. I'm not necessarily sure if that's what Angela was talking about, but that's a case where, the entertainment field or in comedy in particular can make people mad. And that can create conflict where you would think there would be none. So you always kind of have to think about that in the back of your head. Would someone actually be upset about this story that everyone else thinks is okay? So sometimes, you could post one of these stories and you think it might not have conflict, but it might actually have conflict. And then Doran, basketball and other sports. And that kind of goes with what I said about skateboarding, right? Sports can be news to other people, and there can even be conflict and controversy in sporting events, okay? Like, for example, should there be people allowed to go see sporting events right now, right? Because of the distance, 6 feet apart. You can't have the stadiums with people in it, or they're all going to contaminate each other. That may not seem like it has to do with the sport itself, but it kind of does in a way. So once again, when you're thinking about a story, and it may not have one of the 5 attributes, it may actually have all 5. And you just need to think about it. Just take a step back, drink a cup of coffee, think about your story, and think about those 5 attributes. It takes a minute to do. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys chime in on this one now. Go ahead, and once again, when you chime in to start talking, if someone else does at the same time, we'll work it out. Just one of you can just wait a turn. Go ahead and unmute if you would like to say something. Is there any other stories that you'd like to bring up or categories that we didn't mention?
I had a question about this. About
go ahead. Sure.
Would there be a news story that doesn't have any sort of controversy?
Would it be newsworthy, you mean?
I meant, like, if someone wrote a news story, is it possible for a news story to be a news story, if it isn't controversial, it doesn't have a controversial side. Like there isn't some type of controversy in it.
Yeah. Well, once again, I think I've already answered this, but to make it a little bit clear, a story that is newsworthy is more like a scale. Don't think of it as yes or no. It's not that. Newsworthy is more like a scale. Somewhere on that scale is where your story will fall. And on the very, very end, or the very top, I guess maybe I should make it going up and down. At the very top of the newsworthy scale are the stories that probably have very identifiable. You can easily see that it has all 5 attributes. If a story is at the bottom, you're probably going, well, I know it has proximity, but I don't know if it has the other 4, so it's still on the scale of newsworthy, but some stories will be more newsworthy than others. Okay? Does that make sense? I can't remember who asked that, but
Yes.
okay, so any other questions about maybe this, or you want to ask about or talk about a category, or
did someone
I
else?
had a question about if
oh, we got 3 people trying to talk.
go.
Okay, go ahead.
Whatever, tabloids, are news on tabloids worthy in newspaper articles, or in the news in general?
Good point. Tabloids are interesting. Once again, news is subjective. You guys know what objective and subjective are, right? So subjectivity, once again, it's a scale. It's not black and white. It's not, no, it's a scale. And so when we talk about subjectivity, this is where tabloids probably come in. And we're going to talk this term in more detail about that subject. So right now, I want to leave that for later, because that's definitely coming up. But I would argue, just to give you an answer right now, that yes, tabloid stories can be newsworthy. Once again, when you look at the 5 attributes, if you could sit there and say, listen, it has proximity, it has the human interest, it has conflict and controversy, it has this and this and this. Yeah, it's newsworthy. I don't know. We'll talk about, let's just leave that one for later. That's a big subject. But yes, it can be newsworthy. Someone else would like to speak?
I think Naomi wants
Oh, never mind.
No, go ahead. What's up?
I just wanted to ask if kind of like what Astral said, but I saw an article that I was thinking of putting in one of the assignments that you gave us, and it was about Apple making a new phone. Well, it's like I forgot what it was. Yeah, like an SE or something, an iPhone SE. And then it was for $399. Would that have the same? Would that have 5 the 5 vocabulary, the 5 words inside?
Like attributes or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, Naomi. I think once again, I think that story, if you sat there long enough and thought about it hard enough, you could probably come up with a reasoning for all 5 for the phone. It might be a little bit harder for some stories, but for others, it'll be very easy. And that's, once again, every story will be different to every person, and everyone is.
It's like a matter of opinion, kind of.
It is, and we'll talk about that also. Opinion later. But we'll talk about that later. So we only have another 20 minutes. I want to go ahead and look at the next assignment, or thing that was piece of the assignment. Here. Can you guys see when I'm talking at the bottom of the screen? Can you guys see that? Not at all? Gail, can you see the talking at the bottom of the screen? You can? Okay. So anyway, so that's just to help you guys if you want to, maybe if you're having a hard time hearing me, maybe it will pop up on the screen. Okay, so now I'm going to go to present, entire screen, share. And the last part of the assignment, we talked about the other three, was the actual newsworthy assignment. Now I'm hoping that every single one of you got your own copy of this. I hope I didn't mess that up. It looks like I did it right. And what I really want you to do here, it's very easy. I want you to find 3 examples of a story that is already published that, well, that's a news story. And I want you to come up maybe with an alternative title. And when you're doing this, think about, I mean, some of you already did this, and I understand that. That's fine. You could just leave with what you have. But if you want to go back now, after we've talked about the timeliness, proximity, conflict, human interest, and relevance, maybe think about those 5 and think, can you think of another title? Because there may be a title for a story, a feel-good story, for example, that has no controversy in it. And you want to spin, or you want to retitle it more like a conflict or controversy type story. And then maybe you can think of a different title that, like Naomi was just talking about, the iPhone SE, the new one that's coming out. And that's like a tech story. And maybe she wants to spin it more like a proximity story because it's going to be released only in India, maybe, or something. You know, and she wants to talk about that part of the story. So she might want to title, you know, the new SE being released in India. I don't know. That's kind of a weak title, but, you know, she changed it, and that's fine. There is no right or wrong answer. Now, the last part I want to talk about is audience, and I think we just barely scratched that in one of our conversations earlier today. But the audience is, who is the story for? And when we talk about relevance in particular, out of the 5 attributes, relevance really kind of has to do with audience. Well, when you really think about it, maybe even some of the other 5, well, definitely human interest, right? Like certain people may have more of an interest than others in a story. Proximity, if it's only a story in Burkina Faso, well, the target audience might be Burkina Bay people, right? So when you look at the audience, the wider the audience, the more people a story involves, or people might be interested in it, it's probably more likely a more newsworthy story because it has more of the 5 than any other story. So it's just another way for you to gauge, is it a newsworthy story? The more audience people, the bigger the audience, the more newsworthy the story, right? If it's a story and entertaining about, for example, my example, skateboarding, very few people are going to be interested in that, right? Probably male, even though some female skateboard, probably younger people, right? Because old people like me, we don't skateboard, right? And so very few people will actually be interested in that. So when you are listing your 3 stories, I want you to think about that. Who actually is the audience? Is it multiple groups? Is it just one particular very small group of people that might be interested in that story? And that, once again, will give you a clue. Is this a truly newsworthy centerpiece above the fold article? Okay, and so it's just for you to determine. Once again, there is absolutely no wrong or right answer to this. Now I'll give you guys a moment if you'd like to speak up. Let me know what you think about this.
Just for clarification, we don't have to write anything about the story, right? Or like a summary, nothing.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Just
Absolutely not. Just look at the headline. That is all. You don't have
okay.
to read anything. You don't have to watch anything. Oh, by the way, I said watch. You technically could go to YouTube, which is a great resource. They have lots of news stories on there or videos that people make, right? But when you're looking at a YouTube video, out of the 5, someone go ahead, speak up. Which out of these 5 is really important when you're looking at a YouTube video as a potential news story? Go ahead.
Probably.
Maybe relevance.
Which one did you say? Relevance? What, anyone else have any
Yes, relevance.
ideas? Which out of these 5 is super important?
Probably relevance or human interest and timeliness.
Ooh, who
I
said
think
timeliness?
it's human interest.
Human interest. Okay. I think it actually is timeliness, because a lot of the YouTube videos are, you have to look at the time that it was uploaded and created. Okay. So go ahead, you can use YouTube, but really make sure you look at the time or date that it was made. Okay. Just so you know that. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions about
Okay.
this? Oh, someone was going to speak. What was that?
So when we find a story, should we write the what the story's headline is and then change it?
Nope, I don't think I said that, did I? Oh, actually, I think actually you were supposed to do that right here. So you're supposed to put the original title, right? Yeah, you should put the original title at the top and then your alternative title down below. Okay. Sorry about that. I thought that was a little bit more clear, but yeah, it's confusing. You still have till Sunday to do it. So, and if you mess this up, we'll try to do it the way I ask if you want full credit. But yeah, you got time to do it. You got till Sunday. Any other questions about
Also,
Drabo? Yeah.
yes, I had a question.
Go ahead.
Yes. Would a news story that only has one of the attributes but that attracts more people be more worthy than a news story that attracts less people but that has more attributes?
Ooh, that is interesting. And to answer your question, I don't think that would happen. I think the whole point of the 5 attributes is that when it has more of the attributes, it will attract more people by default. I think when it's an interesting question that you raised, though, because someone could probably make an argument, oh, here's a story that has all 5 attributes, yet no one's interested in it. You potentially could do that and find a story like that. I don't doubt it. However, the likelihood of that happening is less likely if you have a story with all 5 attributes. More than likely, you will have a larger audience, right? Now, you could probably find something that's, I don't know, some crazy story that only has to do with a small group of people and no one else cares about. And that probably does happen a lot. Maybe those are the stories that you find in like sport magazines or newspapers dealing only with the sports, or there's newspapers, entertainment newspapers and magazines and stories that are, they're actually the target audience. They're just targeting one audience, people interested in entertainment. That's it. So yeah, I mean, or even skateboarding, I guess, going back to my original thing. there's probably a story, very, very important, newsworthy story about a person, famous skateboarder who just died, Jeff Grosso. And you guys have no clue who that is, right? And you never will. And matter of fact, most people on earth will never see that news story or care. But to people who skateboard, it is a pinnacle story, a centerpiece, above the fold story. So yeah, I guess, I think once again, it's less likely if it has all 5 attributes, but depending on the audience, I guess, answers your question. Okay, anyone else?
I have another question. But so would the skateboarding guy who's famous? Well, yeah.
Jeff Grosso,
yeah. Would people not know him? Well, not know the story because he wasn't famous enough? Because like, if someone like Ariana Grande died, then everyone would be like, Ariana Grande died.
That's interesting you say that, Naomi, because I don't know who Ariana is. I've never heard that name before. I don't know who that is. So, but you guys never heard of Jeff Grosso either. So it's really interesting when you think about these audiences and how it affects whether a story is newsworthy or does it. That's a question we should probably ask.
Okay.
Right? So it's really fascinating. Things that are important to some people are not important to others.
Mm-hmm.
And news, I think the whole point of what I'm bringing out is news is extremely subjective, right?
Yeah, like it's a matter of opinion and stuff. So
Yeah. Are you mad that I don't know who Ariana is?
yes.
Anyway, okay, unless you guys have any other questions, I'm going to let you guys out early of the class. It's 5 minutes anyway, or 6 minutes. But I will stick around for a little bit, and I'll leave the camera and microphone on in case I'll stop recording. But in case any of you have any questions about this assignment, or even online learning or distance learning or problems with another class, I'll stick around and help you with that for a little while. Okay. But besides that, class is dismissed. Thank you for showing up, and I'll post this video after it uploads to my account.
Okay.
Okay, you're
Thank
free to
you.
go.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
See ya.